Father Michael had been preparing for this Christmas Eve Mass for weeks. At 58, with silver hair and kind eyes, he knew this was the most important service of the year. St. Catherine's Church in Baltimore was packed, every pew filled. 180 people had come, some who hadn't stepped inside a church all year, families dressed in their best clothes, children fidgeting with excitement, the scent of pine from the decorated tree near the altar mixed with incense. Candles flickered everywhere, casting dancing shadows on the old stone walls. In the front row sat the Hendersons, celebrating their first Christmas after losing their son overseas. Mrs. Chen was there with her 3 grandchildren, their parents working the night shift, young couples, elderly widows, teenagers dragged along by their parents, all of them gathered for the same reason, to remember hope on the darkest night of the year. Father Michael stood at the altar in his white vestments. The golden chalice reflected candlelight. Behind him, a life-sized nativity scene had been set up, Mary and Joseph kneeling beside the empty manger, waiting for the Christ child to be placed at midnight. The choir began singing Silent Night. Voices rose together, filling every corner of the ancient church. But Father Michael couldn't shake a strange feeling, an unease he couldn't name. He had felt it since arriving that evening. Something was different about tonight. He pushed the thought away, focused on the reading. This was Christmas Eve. Nothing could go wrong on Christmas Eve. In the back of the church, near the heavy wooden doors, a man sat alone in the last pew. His name was Thomas Reed, and he had come here to destroy everything. Thomas Reed was 41 years old. 2 weeks ago, his wife of 15 years told him she was leaving. She took their 2 daughters to her sister's house across the state. The divorce papers arrived 3 days before Christmas. Thomas had been drinking for 48 hours straight. The bottle in his coat pocket was nearly empty. But it wasn't enough to numb what he felt. Rage, pure, burning rage. He blamed God for everything, for his failing marriage, for his daughters who barely spoke to him anymore, for the emptiness that had been growing inside him for years. And tonight, on Christmas Eve, in front of all these people singing about peace and joy, he was going to make God answer for it. Inside his other pocket was a hunting knife, 8 inches of steel. He had been carrying it for 3 days, working up the courage. Father Michael reached the homily. He spoke about light and darkness, about hope when everything seems lost, about how Christmas reminds us that God enters into our suffering. His voice was gentle, practiced, sincere. Thomas felt his hands shaking. The rage was building. God is with us, Father Michael said, even in our darkest moments. Thomas stood up. The pew creaked. A few people glanced back, then returned their attention to the priest. Thomas started walking down the center aisle, slowly at first. His footsteps echoed on the stone floor. More people turned to look. Something about his walk, about his face, made them uneasy. Father Michael noticed the movement. He paused mid-sentence, saw the man approaching, saw something in his eyes that made his blood run cold. Thomas pulled out the knife. Someone screamed. The scream cut through silent night like breaking glass, and chaos erupted in St. Catherine's Church. People jumped from their pews. Mothers grabbed children. Men shouted. But there was nowhere to go. The front of the church was too far, the side exits blocked by panicked bodies. 180 people trapped, watching a man with a knife walking toward their priest. Father Michael stood frozen at the altar. His mind went completely blank. No training prepared him for this. No scripture came to mind. Just pure animal fear. Thomas was 20 feet away now, 15 feet. The knife reflected candlelight. Father Michael could see Thomas's face twisted with pain and anger, and something else. Desperation. "Where were you?" Thomas shouted. His voice cracked raw. "Where were you when I lost everything?" Father Michael opened his mouth. No words came out. Thomas was 10 feet away, running now. The knife raised. Father Michael closed his eyes. In that split second, he thought of his mother, of his sister, of the 25 years he'd served as a priest. He thought, this is how it ends. Then, the lights went out. Every single light in the church extinguished simultaneously. The electric lights, yes, but also something impossible. Every candle, all 200 candles burning throughout the church, gone. Instant, complete darkness, the kind of darkness that makes you question if your eyes are even open. The church went silent. Even the screaming stopped. Just darkness and held breath. Then, light. But not from the candles or the electric lights, from the nativity scene. The figure of Mary, the statue that had stood in St. Catherine's for 80 years, was glowing, a soft white light emanating from the plaster figure. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Thomas stopped mid-stride. The knife fell from his hand, clattering on stone. He collapsed to his knees, sobbing, and 180 people witnessed something they would never be able to explain. The lights came back on, every candle, every bulb, as suddenly as they'd gone out. But the moment had passed. Thomas knelt on the floor, face in his hands, crying like a child. The knife lay 3 feet away. Father Michael stood at the altar, untouched, staring at the nativity scene. The glow was gone. Mary was just painted plaster again. Police arrived 12 minutes later. They found a church full of people standing in absolute silence. No one had left. No one had moved. They just stood there, trying to process what they'd seen. Thomas didn't resist arrest. He was still crying, kept repeating, "She stopped me. She stopped me." The officers were confused until people started talking. All of them. Confirming the same impossible story. The lights going out, every candle, the statue glowing. One of the officers, Rodriguez, had been raised Catholic. He looked at the statue of Mary for a long time before leading Thomas away. Father Michael was checked by paramedics. Not a scratch on him. They wanted to take him to the hospital for shock. He refused. That night, after everyone had finally gone home, after the police had taken their statements, after the church was empty again, Father Michael sat in the front pew. He looked at the nativity scene, at Mary's painted face. "Thank you," he whispered. Thomas Reed spent Christmas in psychiatric evaluation, but something had changed in him. The rage was gone. In its place was something he hadn't felt in years: peace. When Father Michael visited 3 days later, Thomas broke down again. "I felt her," he said. "In that darkness, I felt someone holding me back, not physically, inside, like she reached into my chest and stopped my heart from doing what it wanted to do." Father Michael visited Thomas every week after that, helped him get treatment, helped him rebuild. Thomas never returned to St. Catherine's, but every Christmas Eve, he lights a candle for the Virgin Mary who saved 2 lives that night, and for the 180 witnesses who saw light in the darkest moment and believed.